So moving into some Neoplatonists, start off with Ammonius Saccas of Alexandria, I guess. He's like the precursor of Neoplatonism, if I understand correctly, and the teacher of Plotinus. Some writers have stated that Ammonius Saccas was a Christian, but then possibly conflated that with a different Ammonius Saccas of Alexandria who wrote biblical texts. I wanted to get your opinion on if you have any opinion on that.
Um, well, yeah, Ammonius Saccas is technically the last of the Middle Platonists, and he essentially is heavily involved in the training of the first Neoplatonist or late Platonist Plotinus. And we find that Plotinus saw lots of people speaking and talking, and he couldn't find the right teacher. Um, and he found his teacher in Ammonius Saccas. Now, the thing is, we find in his philosophy a kind of Orientalism. It has a lot in common with certain types of Vedic philosophy and transcendental philosophy. And believe it or not, I even see a lot of correlations between his doctrine and Buddhism. But also after he studies with Ammonius Saccas, he is I believe Porphyry tells us that he wants to go to parts east. He wants to study the philosophy of India in India. And so he makes some arrangements to go over there with this battalion, this like military unit. The whole trip falls apart. So he doesn't end up going. But then you still see this kind of um oriental flavor, you know. It's I mean, because it's not he would have everybody knows this at this point, but he would have considered himself just a Platonist, just a philosopher.
Mhm.
But the thing is that his his transmission or expression or interpretation of the Platonic philosophy up to his time was markedly different enough to merit a completely new distinction, right? Because it's with him that's okay, this is Neoplatonism. This is not, this is something new. So now we have nobody else was looked at as a founder, right? Plato was the founder, and then you had the academics, and then you had the Middle Platonists, and now you've got this new thing, and Plotinus is the founder. And then, obviously they say that Iamblichus is like the quote unquote second founder, but because he brings theurgy to the table in a big way, ritual, really. But the interesting thing, and let's not forget, Alexandria was known as the city where East meets West. Interesting thing is in Ammonius Saccas's name. And I bring that up because I think it's super important, and we have no other fucking details about him. So what am I going to say? But he Ammonius Saccas was most likely not a given or proper name. It was an epithet. Um, you know, uh, Ammonius meaning teacher or sage, and then Saccas, uh, being relating to what back then would have been called Scythia, which is Scythia, which is on the part of the Asian continent. Uh, it's related directly to India. So it's really interesting because then he becomes the Scythian sage. You know, I believe something. I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I hear these things also in other philosophers' names. I hear like an Oriental flavor, and I think to myself, it's probably an imported word. It's probably like I don't. So I can definitely see that happening, but it's really interesting because it again, like we're circling back. I do believe that it's at its core, the very, very core, like if it were a fruit or something. You really you gotta bite through it and get through it, but the core is the same. And I think that it just keeps circling back on itself. Right? It's just this big Ouroboros. It's they say that they call it Platonic Orientalism. That the Platonic philosophies were highly influenced by parts east, and then so Plato brings them west, and and now he's influenced Western culture completely, and then somehow it circles back right to the Middle East, and then that comes back to the West, and it's just this constant kind of circular movement that these teachings are making, and they're expressed very differently, but they penetrate everything. They penetrate everything.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so what about like the thought on kind of the debate about the plausibility or possibility of him being a Christian? I said Porphyry, I guess, said that the parents of Ammonius Saccas were Christians, but upon learning Greek philosophy, Ammonius Saccas rejected his parents' religion for paganism. And then, so my thoughts on this at this point in time, given the general understanding, what was considered paganism? Maybe let me know your thoughts, but would this mean appealing to things like the Archons or the nature spirits? And is it possible that both could be true at the same time? That there could be like a Christian reverence, religious aspects at play while still maintaining pagan practices? Like maybe rejecting the religion of his parents was a rejection of some kind of like rejection of strict particular iterations of Christianity. Yeah, I really wonder so much about like Porphyry's definition of Christian
Well,
and his
the thing
understanding.
there's a couple of things that you got to remember. The Archons are Christian. St. Paul writes
Mm.
about them.
Okay.
Like it's all over Christianity. So that doesn't make it. That's the whole thing. Platonism informs Christian theology and cosmology,
Mm.
right? Tertullian, Tia personae una substantia. Where do we see that? The Holy Trinity, three persons, one substance. Well, that predates Christianity, you know, in a lot of ways. Or it predates, I won't say that, it predates that particular theological doctrine, right? Because we don't have, that's not in the Bible, you know, the Holy Trinity. It talks about the Holy Spirit, talks about the Father and the Son, but it doesn't, you know, that theological doctrine comes directly from Tertullian, who was a schooled Neoplatonist, and a lot of them remain Neoplatonists in their philosophy, but embraced Christianity and then imported all that kind of philosophy and said, well, look, Plato knew what was going on, and it was just confirmed in the Christ. And because that's really, I mean, in Plotinus comes up with that idea of the three hypostases. That's a huge thing. And who really knows? Right? We have the Enneads. We don't have maybe the stuff he was studying. That idea of the three hypostases could have existed way earlier. It's just that this is where, for us, retrospectively, it rises to from subterranean realms in the historical record. We don't know that he invented that. We just assume that because we haven't found it anywhere else in the same way. But ultimately, Platonism and Christianity are have been bedfellows from the first. So I think it's very possible to participate in both of them. But then on the other hand, it's like orthodoxy, like small O orthodoxy, did not exist the same way. So it's like nowadays you get this kid who's just like, you get kids who are like, I don't want to go to church, and like my family's oppressing me because they believe in Jesus, and it's like you know that's not really the way that Christianity necessarily. There were many different kinds of Christianities.
Right.
Like
So,
there wasn't one thing to rebel from. I personally, I think that the issue is likely way more complex, but the most important thing that you have to remember in this entire distinction is that Porphyry did not like the Christians. He
mm,
wrote a tract against the Christians, and
okay.
he didn't reject
Yeah.
Christ, but he said that Christ would be very fucking disappointed in Christians. So he really, really didn't like them. So basically what he's doing there, right, is he's saying, because he fought for pagan philosophy in an age where that was beginning to see the first suppressions or tension between that. And he was basically saying, yeah, well, this Christian guy, he got real wise and he went pagan. That's kind of what's happening there. But there's also probably truth somewhere. Will we ever be able to figure it out? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess then in that case, Porphyry would have been aware that Christian conceptions included things like the Archons, so would rule out things along those lines. But then I would wonder at this time that he was living what his definition would have been of what he's calling Christian in particular, that he's saying Ammonius rejected in his parents' form of Christianity. But yeah, maybe he was just saying that to try to lend credence to his own adversity towards
I
Christianity.
mean, I mean, here's the thing, right? I rejected my parents' form of Christianity.
Yeah.
I remain a Christian. I study Neoplatonism. I do magic. I study the occult. I serve in a Gnostic church. I'm still a Christian. So it's one of those things where it's like you can't always boil it down. Like people, but here's the thing: like if I talk to like a parish priest, he'd be like, "No, you're not."
Yeah.
So it's like what fucking metric, what perspective are we taking here? So that's where it gets hairy. You can't really say what somebody was. And even at a certain time, if you would ask me when I was 15, I would have been like, I'm a Satanist. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it changes. Who are we talking about? Who's talking about that person? So it's really it becomes very difficult in these instances to say conclusively anything, particularly about somebody like Ammonius Saccas, who I mean we got like one picture of him and we're just assuming it's him.
Yeah.
We have like one, like I think it's like a tile mosaic or something like that. We have one picture of the guy, rendering, artistic rendering of him, and we're not even sure it's him.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We're not even sure if that was his name, Ammonius Saccas,
Yeah.
or if it was like a nickname.
All right. So then we have Plotinus, himself raised in Roman Egypt, wrote the Enneads. Maybe you could touch a little bit on the Enneads and the contents of that, and then anything else about Plotinus that you find noteworthy.
Oh well, Plotinus is. I mean, we could do probably like a series of these podcasts on Plotinus. Um, So the Enneads are basically a lifetime of his. Well, he wrote them. It's his personal philosophy, and not all of it is kind of congruous with itself. And I think that's a testament to the fact that it was written over. It wasn't written in one sitting. It was written over time. But the thing is, Plotinus dies, and Porphyry is his student. And Porphyry collects posthumously the philosophical writings of Plotinus, and he collects them into I believe 9 groups of 9 texts apiece. And obviously, for anybody who knows, Enea means 9 in Greek. We don't understand why he did that. It's not like they have any relationship to each other. It's kind of haphazard, but he just groups them into like 9 groups of 9 treatises a piece. So that's why they're called the Enneads. It's just the way Porphyry arranged them. But the philosophy, obviously, I would wager that more people have read the Bible. Well, I mean, from cover to cover, right? Not a lot of people read the Bible cover to cover. You know, I would wager that more people have read that than the Enneads. And by that I mean to say it's just dense. It's dense. It seems like a lifetime endeavor to really read the Enneads. And inevitably, some smartass will be like, "Well, I read them." Uh, you know, how much of it did you understand? And I don't mean can tell me wrote, like what and quote me chapter and verse, but it's just really it changes. It's kind of uh this document that morphs, but there's a lot of stuff in there that is somewhat, mostly consistent. And the big thing being the theoria of of Plotinus. Plotinus's philosophy was very, very interesting. I find his ideas to be of the fall and of cosmology uh, and soteriology. I find them to be the most intuitive. It's like what it seems, like bells go off. I start like my something in me begins to resonate like a tuning fork. When you bring a tuning fork that's struck and vibrating and sounding next to a tuning fork that is, has the same is constructed to the same note, you bring them within proximity and the other one will automatically pick up the vibration. Something like that happens to me when I read and understood his philosophy on and that, which is basically that obviously you have the three hypostases. You have the one, intellect and psyche, and those are all meaning like not my intellect, not my psyche soul, um, but a universal one, really the world soul and the greater soul of the oversoul, and the intellect, the nous, the mind of God, and the one, the ineffable. You cannot say anything about it other than what it isn't, because it's simultaneously everything and nothing. That's the tradition of apophasis, the apophatic tradition that we see everywhere. We see in Oriental, that is Eastern religions as well. But how does nothing become everything? Well, so the divine nous, the intellect, contemplates the latent, inexpressed contents of the one, and it starts out in very, very abstract, something like geometry, mathematics, these very abstract forms, that are very difficult to understand, and then discursively, and then that generates this objectification, because if you can think about something, then it's not you anymore. Really, you're at least temporarily objectifying it in order to examine it. And so therefore that generates, since there's this gap between the observer or object and subject, there becomes this desire towards it, and that's representative of the next phase, which is psyche, the soul. The soul, in its desire for the objectified contents of the one, plunges downward towards them, and into materiality. And the thing is that highly matter there, that's what it was, ile, highly, it means like matter, which it's kind of like this gross sticky substance, is in and of itself inert and cloying and heavy, tending downward, sinking. It is not evil in and of itself, it just possesses no life, no light. And but it is kind of vivified by pneuma, spirit. And what can happen there in the soul's downward trajectory is that it gets stuck, because this pure, aspect formerly of this transcendent hypostatic reality is now subjecting itself to the like orgiastic illusion of multiplicity, and so it becomes what Plotinus says is that the soul's main problem is that it could have dove down and then come just quickly turned back, but it didn't. It went all the way down, and now the main issue is, to what end does the soul become invested in matter? Is it in matter and then seeking matter for its own ends? Because that will make the soul stuck. And that's the myth of Persephone and Hades right there. It's exactly what the fuck it is. And that's his idea. But his thing is that the truest portion of the constituent of the being is that, the soul, in its diving downward, so to speak, is more of this kind of phantasmagoric trance illusion. It's not actually fully down here. There's another part of the soul, right, which is the nous, because it's one thing, three aspects of one thing. The nous remains elevated, and that's evident in the fact that we can go inward and contemplate these abstract things and have these sort of out-of-body experiences, and in our minds experience what people would call magic, what people would call visions. Our mind can still do that even if our body is in this room. And so we are still connected. We have a divine connection by way of sympathia, our sympathy, our mind, our personal nous is still directly in some way tied to the hypostatic nous. And so he says, if we retreat and kind of that rope that connects us, if we climb that rope and we retreat from the illusions and enticements of matter and focus on those mental sort of connections with the divine nous, then we can experience henosis, union with the divine. Then we can become a species of enlightened. And then we can kind of evolve beyond this. And he calls that theoria, which means divine contemplation. Whereas Iamblichus said, no, we have to use the matter because there's pneuma in the matter. There are the Platonic forms, the ideals. Perfection is in matter, even if matter can only vaguely, dimly express it, because it's constantly changing and falling apart, which means it's not real and it's not perfect. But it still possesses some influence from perfection, and so and some species of pneuma, of spirit. And so we have to use matter to climb back up, and that's theurgy.
Wow, that is amazing. It kind of reminds me a lot of like the shattered vessels things or the trapped sparks that need to be liberated and like
Yes,
all.
100,000%. And that's exactly why I'm constantly saying Kabbalah is not inherently Hebrew. Kabbalah
Yeah.
was a product of Hellenized Judaism of the first centuries BCE in Alexandria. We have the Septuagint translation from around then. We have the Merkavah, which is Jewish theurgy. That's exactly what it is, right? The rabbis, the mystics going into vision, in the chariot, and starting here and going up towards the Ogdoad, right? They're passing the 7 planetary spheres, and at each one is an archon that's trying to stop them. And then you have to keep going until you pass beyond the realm of the Ogdoad into the unknown. It's fucking Platonism.
Damn.
Kabbalah is the same thing. Lurianic Kabbalah is the Ogdoad. It's the same concepts. That's the whole thing. Like, this is why I get frustrated with this scholastic academic. They can't see the forest for the trees. There's something very, very concretely real here that is being transmitted. It's one fucking thing wearing different clothes.
100%. Damn. And it's also a lot about, I mean, it reminds me too of like the divine contemplation thing in regards to all of this. Kind of reminds me a lot of similar to David Hyam Smith's sort of conception of things and how he talks about a lot of this stuff as well, which is
I
very
mean, that's
obviously Kabbalistic and everything.
that's what that's the whole thing. That's what he's doing.
Yeah.
Right? His esoteric cartography is a method of him staying in the nous. And not only that, but my first conversation with David, I noticed over his right shoulder, I was like, is that a bust of Socrates? And
Oh
he's
yeah.
like, I love that you noticed that. So yeah, I mean, that was the bulk of our conversation, was talking about how, the Neoplatonists, um, he thinks they were non-theists. I don't necessarily agree with that, but or at least he takes the position that he's a non-theist.
Hmm.
But anyway, it's just really interesting that he fully, of course he does. He's fucking brilliant. If
Yeah.
anything, it's incredible that my monkey mind has pulled itself up by the bootstraps. But it was just really, really cool to see that he had a bust of Socrates, and we right away we started talking about Neoplatonism. And it's the same language. Everything is, you can transpose everything. You can transpose everything.
Damn. All right. So Proclus, I don't I don't really have a whole lot on Proclus, so maybe you could fill in the gaps with him, and his life and what we know
Brilliant.
about him.
Brilliant. He's
Yeah.
brilliant. He was one of, I think, one of the last scholarks of the Platonic Academy. He actually moved back to Athens to run the academy there. But his thing, Proclus, was the great synthesizer of the entire Platonic tradition, from Plato to Ammonius Saccas to Plutarch to the Middle Platonists to the Neoplatonists, Iamblichus, Plotinus. He synthesized all of it into one whole, and it was what he did. His commentaries on the Parmenides, his Platonic theology that he put together. If you want to understand Neoplatonism and Plato, you have to read Proclus, because he was able to have hindsight. He came after all of them. He came in like the 6th century. They were all dead, and had contributed their work. So he was able to look back, synthesize all of it. And I believe it was him. But when he arrived at the Platonic Academy in Athens, there was no more like philosophical discourse. There was no more theoria. It was all theurgy. Theurgy had become so popular that he had to like say, okay, I have to reintroduce the philosophical stuff to these people. So he was able to really, really blend things in an amazing way. If you really want to have a very firm understanding, but it's dense, right? It's crazy. He's got these insane commentaries. They're like this thick, So but yeah, he also taught I don't know if he taught him one-on-one or if it was kind of like that's, I consider Dion Fortune a teacher to me, and I
Hmm.
visited her grave and everything, but I never met her, so I don't know if it was that kind of thing. But apparently, Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, the one who introduced all of the hierarchies, into Christianity that we use in magic, really, and this kind of chain of being. He really introduced that. He was a student of Proclean Neoplatonism. He basically took Proclus and put it in Christianity, which is really interesting. So you get the choir of angels and the cherubim and seraphim and all that stuff that they go through in the liturgy,
Yeah.
in like Catholic liturgy. But there's a lot that can be said. The thing is, if you want to start talking about the Platonic, the stuff that's in the his commentaries, you gotta be like a fucking Platonic scholar. So you gotta know stuff about the diamond, you gotta know stuff about Theoria. You've got to know all this crazy sort of stuff from the Platonic dialogues in order to really start engaging with, in a meaningful way, Proclus. So obviously, I'm saying if you want to understand Platonism, go read Proclus, but I don't mean that as like a Platonism for dummies. You need to really know your shit, and then it'll all kind of, he puts a nice ribbon on.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I was telling you a little while ago, I'm starting to see so much of why you talk about all the things that you talk about, because it's like these are where all the dots start connecting everything. It's
Yeah.
just fucking blowing my mind.
And here's the thing, dude. It's like I did not go out there methodically and look for this stuff. It was a series of fucking synchronicities that brought me exactly to where I needed to be. I did not go chasing after this stuff. I met people. I randomly found passages, books fell into my hands. When I was looking for the next thing, it would just fucking appear. So it's not even like I'm like intentionally questing to do this, which is pretty amazing, because it really is all here. It's really all here. And for Western people, you know, because I don't give a fuck what's nice to say. I care about the truth.
Yeah.
And the truth is that we have differences, and they're significant, meaningful, and important. And the way that we cognize and interpret and synthesize information, is you are much more likely to fully understand this one thing, this one trajectory, right? We're talking about it, the core and the naked truth underneath the different clothing. To really understand it in a Western paradigm, you have to understand Plato and you have to understand the Platonic tradition. That's how you get there. And then everything else just fucking clicks.
Yeah. Damn. All right. So Porphyry of Tyre. So Porphyry, you like you mentioned, he wrote a piece called Against the Christians. I guess it was banned by Constantine. I wonder what the general consensus and points that he addressed in this work were. Have you read it? Like, what was the beef that he had that was pissed Constantine off so much that he banned this work?
Um, well, the thing is, well, Constantine is weird. Constantine only knows politics. Constantine don't know religion.
Hmm.
Constantine's mother was the religious one. She was the Christian, or at least that's the official, you know, PR line. But Constantine knew politics. He was his deathbed conversion. He never converted to a Christian until he was laying dead. You
Oh
know,
wow, okay, yeah.
yeah, he never did. But he saw the writing on the wall, and his whole goal was to Christianize the empire. But really, what ends up happening is he ends up preserving Rome. He creates this lifeboat for Roman hegemony. Um, and it becomes, the Vatican. It becomes the papacy, becomes the next, it's like a snake. Constantine was like, okay, it's time to shed the skin. And because that's when everything starts really getting murky. Because you can't, it's like Christ said, you cannot serve God and mammon. You cannot serve God and money. You cannot have two masters. And it's like Christianity went fucking Coca-Cola. They got
Yeah.
m like imperial funding. And it just everything swiftly went downhill. Um, that's the whole thing. The Christian path is to suffer. You're better off a fucking martyr in Christianity. It was better when they were getting fed to the lions 100 years before. I'm not saying that because I have any animosity to those people. That's a horrible death to die. But I mean, it's really true. You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the enemy, right? That quote from the Batman movie. But it is very true. I see it constantly, actually in action happening, and that's exactly what happened with Christianity. Um, and I think it's that point. So it would have been a highly political move for Constantine to just silence his opponents. Look, we're seeing it right now. You see it with fucking Biden. We see it with everybody. It's like I'm just gonna shadow ban you. You're not allowed to say that. You're getting a fine. We're putting a mask on you. We're putting a mask on your asshole. We're gonna seal you up and dump you in the fucking ocean. It's just because it's like you're not saying what I want people to hear.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. And the main thing is that Porphyry, and I don't reduce everybody to those kinds of politics. I truly don't. I truly believe that most people back then believed. I think that Game of Thrones was one of the worst fucking things for our mental diet that has ever happened. This retrofitting of our own shitty personalities, our own cynical ethos on prior times. We have no fucking clue that was the case. But the thing is, it's comforting because it makes us feel like, oh, we're only human. Well, like the lowest iteration of human. We're almost fucking monkeys at this point. But 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 the thing is, in Constantine, I've studied him greatly. He's extremely interesting, and I do find plenty of evidence uh, that convinces me that he was one of these personages. The biggest tip of the hat for me was that he never converted to Christianity.
Yeah.
He's had all this shit and he stayed a fucking pagan. That's a central doctrine is baptism, and rites of those rites of Christian initiation and stuff like that. So it's the man himself was baptized, Christ. So it's that to me is suspicious. So I think that would be it. But the thing is that Porphyry didn't have anything necessarily to say, I think, too badly about Christ's teachings as the Gospels would have. I mean, the Gospels, I'm pretty sure canonical scripture had not been solidified at that point. But either way, there were teachings of the Christ, and I don't think Porphyry railed against those. If I remember correctly, Porphyry was criticizing Christians, the burgeoning Christian community. Really. And I mean that comes with being a philosopher, is just thinking everybody else is dumb. You know what I mean? Listen to me. Not a great way to be. Not a great way to be. But it is kind of endemic to the type of person that becomes a philosopher. So I think that had a lot to do with it. Porphyry was not somebody that I feel personally. I don't feel like he had a very strong. I think he was much more of an intellectual than a true philosopher. I think a true philosopher like Plotinus and Plato, Pythagoras, Socrates, they're more concerned with, I would say, their own comportment, the way their lifestyle, the way they live their life, and transcendental realities. Now, Porphyry was very concerned with, the method, if we're going to transcend, what does that look like? And I think that in a certain sense, we can pigeonhole these things. I think Iamblichus was more on the point by saying there is some theory, but at a certain point that shit goes out the window, along with everything else. Because you can't, in order to this realm is based on like logistikon, reason, or logic, law. It has its laws. Now you can learn everything there is to know about them, but you'll still be here. So if you want to transcend this thing, you have to let go of those things. That can't be your main concern at a certain point. At a certain point, like, you have to have completely trans-rational experiences.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I would say, like, I have a lot of issues myself with more mainstream kind of Christian societies and behavior and character and so on, but I still consider myself a Christian. Like you said, many other Christians would argue with me and maybe tell me I'm not Christian according to their standards because I'm, interested in studying other books outside of their canon or whatever it is. But so I don't know, maybe it's something similar along those lines. But
Yeah.
So Iamblichus, who has become so interesting for me. Iamblichus was a Syrian biographer of Pythagoras, a Theurgist, descendant from the house of Simpsigeramus, a Roman client dynasty of Arab priest kings. This Roman client dynasty of Syrian priest kings was known to have ruled by 46 BC from Arethusa and later from Emesa, Syria, until between 72 and 78 or 79, or at the latest, the reign of Emperor Antoninus Pius, 138 to 161. So Emesa was recorded by Herodian to have been the 3rd century center of a worship of the ancient pagan god Elagabalus, which was a sun and mountain god, I guess,
Yeah.
was considered
Elagabalus.
like the lord of Baal. So Iamblichus was a descendant of this dynasty of priest kings. So I guess there was like Iamblichus the first, son of uh Sampsiceramus the first, and brother of Alexander, who reigned 48 BC to 31 BC. Then later on, there was Iamblichus II, the son of Iamblichus I, who reigned 20 BC to 14. Then later on, there was Iamblichus, um, the third century novelist, or yeah, then Iamblichus, the third century Neoplatonist. Oh, and then at the very earliest part of the whole family tree, before Sampsiceramus the first, there I guess was like the OG Iamblichus that goes like up to the very top of the tree. So that was pretty fucking interesting to me. Just like all of the different ones. Then it skips, it goes to this um what was the name of that guy? Sampsiceramus, but then above him it's Iamblichus again, and it doesn't go any farther than that. So I just thought that was like fascinating. And I find his name just really interesting too, like the beginning being I am. I don't know if there's anything to that, but yeah, maybe what are your thoughts on Iamblichus, and maybe talk a little bit about him, as there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. So he's basically where we get our modern theurgy from. This whole idea. Everybody's talking about it and giving me fucking nosebleeds. It's just like, I myself too,
Yeah.
it's just such a trending thing in our communities, but it's like, I don't know. It's where I feel like a lot of us are putting the cart before the horse again with it.
Hmm.
But bound to happen. It's okay. But he really hairy, you know. There's this weird thing, and we've spoken about before. He writes his document that we call On the Mysteries, or De Mysteriis in Latin, but it's On the Mysteries of the Egyptians, Chaldeans, etc. Um, and he's basically he writes as this priest Abaddon, this Egyptian priest Abaddon, um, in response to Porphyry, the philosopher, writing this kind of um, this condescending sort of, like he's trying to have like a gotcha moment where he's like asking, he's trying to make theurgy and ritual sort of seem ridiculous and a lot of these ways. Now, I have heard from several people that this was a way of sort of teaching.
Hmm.
The teacher would ask you questions, and then you'd kind of write a formal refutation. It's kind of like defending your thesis. um I've heard that. I'm not convinced. um the thing is too, I mean, it's like, how do we, I'm sure there are ways. I'm sure there are several people who could who could show me why. But a lot of the times it's like, how do we even know for 100% that Iamblichus was the winner? You didn't put his name on the fucking thing. It's signed Abamon, the priest Abamon. And so that's really interesting to me. But the current scholarship suggests that it was Iamblichus who wrote On the Mysteries, and everybody's basically 110% certain about that. I don't give a shit who wrote it. It's the document itself is fairly remarkable, but very, very dense, very terse, and very obscure. It's filled with a lot of jargon. A lot of that also has to do with Thomas Taylor's translations, the words that he used. He spoke an archaic form of English to us today, and he seemed to be the kind of guy who kind of maybe liked the smell of his own gas. I don't know. He just seemed like he was very, very pompous, like very, like an intellectual. It's like, even look, I understand that you translated this like several centuries ago, but you definitely could have chosen simpler words. There's no excuse here. But it's a very interesting document. It delineates and defends and kind of brings the point home about why theurgy is necessary, and the embodiment of the soul, and the reintroduction of these ancient Egyptian and Chaldean rites back into Western spiritual practice. Basically saying, like, you're fucking thinking too much. Like use the mind insofar as it can bring you to do this work. But you know, but I mean, he himself, he had a tremendous sort of hold on these things in a very philosophical, systematic way. But the ultimate goal here, you know, he was trying to defend ritual. They were trying to, you know, Plotinus, um, Porphyry. It's not that they were against all kinds of ritual, because ritual permeated society. You know, at that point, you go and you give offerings, you do this, you do that, you do the other thing. But in terms of like henosis and ascension, I mean, Plotinus is reported to have said, "I won't go to the gods have to come to me." Um, whereas it was the opposite in Iamblichus' system. You go to the gods, or at least you call to them and you kind of meet them halfway. But and again, we're using that spatial location and that trajectory. We're using it as an analogy. It doesn't really think he's like hopping in a spaceship and going to Mars,
Hmm.
but it's the thing about it is that he doesn't really give us much in terms of actual technique. There's a ton of philosophy, there's a ton of theory, but we don't have a lot of technique. But there is some brilliant, uh, really brilliant stuff in there. Beautiful, inspiring. Um, the thing is that you're not likely to get it on your first couple of reads of the Taylor translation. What I recommend for anybody who wants to understand theurgy is to read Dr. Gregory Shaw's Theurgy and the Soul. That will definitely help you understand. He breaks the terms down and relates how they relate to one another, and really synthesizes it in a way that's understandable. And really, I mean, you could probably use that book to as a starting point to make your own theurgic practice.
And do we know anything about the etymology of the name?
I think so, yeah, but you also got to understand, like, you know, Germanic and stuff like that, from which English is culled, is an evolution. Didn't exist, so I am wouldn't it wouldn't have any bearing on what we
Mm.
believe I am would be.
And then
Those words didn't exist yet.
yeah. So like say biblically, like, you know, Moses in the burning bush, and the bush replies, I am that I am.
Yeah, but he
Uh
does it in Hebrew.
right, that's what I was
He
gonna
doesn't.
say.
He doesn't do it in English. He says, hey, yeah, sure, hey, yeah."
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. Hey, yeah, that would be the name for that.
Yeah.
Um, Sweet. Okay, then. So all right. After all this being said, what is your opinion about what constitutes a philosophical mind?
Um, curiosity. Uh, I would say this. I would say the underlying thing is what we would call in the Platonic tradition eros. Um, eros, not people get the wrong idea. They think they hear eros and they think like a romantic or a sexual love.
Mm.
There in a philosophical context, eros is desire. You desire God in a similar way to the way that you desire a lover. And what is the inevitable consequence of desiring your lover? Unity with them. And so that eros is uh, a very intense, unshakable, unstoppable, extremely passionate desire and love, a love based desire for union with your creator. That's the why. But philosophers choose to act on that impetus uh, with their minds. Not everybody has to do that. Some people are just right. There's bhakti. There's just pure devotion. That don't work for me. I've done it. Um, and I've had some species of success, but it's not taken me where you know my trajectory needs to go right now. And I think that that is what a philosopher is. that, right? It's hardwired into the word philia, love, right? Sophia is wisdom, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a love of wisdom. It's not a fucking interest in wisdom. It's not a curiosity. It's a love. It's a burning love. You have to love this shit. You have to be obsessed with it the way that you're obsessed with your, your romantic part. Beyond that, it pales in comparison. That's just the best analogy we can use. But it's definitely of a quality which is beyond your ability to deny it. You cannot say no. You have no fucking choice. It's just about, okay, how do I go about doing this? And for me, the most sustainable, the most tenable, and the most impactful, not just for myself, but for other people, right? Because Michael Osborne said to me recently also, it was brilliant. I wanted to get up and just clap for him. Quietism does not benefit other people's lives for the good.
Mm.
So philosophy, you will get better, and the people that you are having discourse with will get better. So your sphere of influence for the positive, for the good, is much wider than just doing yoga.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and then so if we look at philosophy and what that love of wisdom births, if we look at like the patterns with a lot of these individuals that we've been discussing, I mean, their character, they're in general very humble, very anti-tyrannical, very they have a lot of integrity. Um, so yeah, I'm just trying to like kind of pinpoint a lot of the characteristics that come out of these sort of individuals, and then
I don't know that I agree with
no,
humility. No, I don't know that I agree at all with humility, because again, I'm going to go back to our journal analogy before. How many people of you listening could commit to writing in your journal one page every day?
mm,
I don't think it's a lot of you. I'm not I'm not trying to be I'm really not trying to be a dick. There are some months where I can't do it. I don't think it's a lot of you. Now think about having written like 30 fucking dialogues. Written it, not typed. It's not dictated. You wrote that.
yeah,
And it's filled with your philosophy that you've spent years arguing with people over. You've got to there's got to be a level of whatever the opposite of humility is there, uh
well, could we
to
say maybe
I
like
would sorry.
I was
I would say more than like think about it, right? Socrates, he sat in the square and he told everybody they were fucking wrong. And he went and he showed them step by step that they were wrong. And if you read those dialogues, it's fucking great. It's awesome. I forget every time. When I go back and I'm in the middle of a dialogue, I'm like, it's like watching reality television. I'm like, this is uncomfortable. This is uncomfortable. He is so fucking rude and snide, and he's just ripping into this person, and he's moody, and he flies off the fucking handle constantly. He says stuff where like everybody in the room is like, Socrates, relax, relax. Like, what are you doing? And he's like, fuck you. He's just flying off the handle. It's amazing. It's amazing to read and to picture in the mind's eye. That's not a humble person. But in the traditional way that we think about it, ultimately he's doing a kindness.
mm,
But what he is humble to, he subordinates himself to, is his daimon,
right,
is
okay,
his
that's what I was gonna
God. Humility to God,
yeah,
ultimately, and service to man. I'm not gonna bow before you. I'm not a pacifist. No, nobody. Jesus wasn't a pacifist. He went to the cross willingly because it was part of the plan, but he also whipped the money lenders, the money changers. Not a pacifist. He says specifically, I came to bring a sword, not peace. So, I'm not saying that you're wrong, but I'm just trying to reintroduce this perspective to people that, like, nobody who ever did anything really that great was what really truly embodied what we in a modern sense think of as humility.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So we could say maybe a dedication and a following of their higher genius, like an unyielding pursuit and persistence in regard to truth, maybe like a tough love, like love in the sense of dedication to the good
Yes.
at the expense of anybody's feelings, regardless
And
of
most especially at the expense of your own.
mm, yeah.
You know, it's you don't want to who wants to argue with people, you know?
Yeah. Um, so okay, so I don't know, I may have asked you this before, but you always ask your guests on your podcast. So I want to ask this for you in the context of this conversation. What is magic or how do you experience it?
Uh, um well, I would say magic is the partially subjective and partially objective result of a specific outcome that was affected by non-physical, or at least non-logical, non-material, non-empirical. It doesn't follow the laws of physics. It's not beholden to, I push the domino falls down, it hits the other It's not that. You can't say, okay, here's where it started and here's how it was affected. You cannot. You can't. We've been trying to do it, but it doesn't work. You're never gonna pigeonhole it bigger than you. I don't care if you're fucking Agrippa. You do your best. It's great. We have systems. You're never going to denude it. It's just not going to happen. But it's an outcome that happened almost despite itself. That was a set intention. So in other words, I wanted this thing to happen. Rather than go and do all the physical things to make that happen, I did a ritual in my room, and seemingly causally, the thing that I wanted to happen happened. That's one form of, I would say, manifestation magic. The underlying causes, or I would say the reason that that can happen, is a law that we don't understand. Um, it's not forthcoming. It does not readily reveal itself to us. But whatever it is the same reason that alchemical changes can happen, spiritual growth can happen, the miraculous can happen. So really, it's this, I would say, hidden quality um, to reality of all levels that is inexplicable and exists in everything, um, and can be utilized for different intentions. Right? The Goetic magician makes fucking contracts with dark entities to obtain, I don't know, love, a new car, sense of self-respect. Ironically, the Theurgist uh, attempts a trajectory of spiritual evolution. But they're using the same laws, they're using the same principles.
All right, beautiful. So I should probably roll the rest into another podcast because we've got a lot to cover still, and this is pretty amazing. But before we do, I want to address one of our Patreon's questions, and then I'll end with like a couple closing questions. But I'll go ahead and I'll ask a question. She asks, is there such thing as theurgic astrology? Do we have any historical evidence of rituals or esoteric practices existing where someone would be able to influence by way of ritual work or path working, challenging placements or transits, basically using your birth chart as a working map? Side note, this is where I'm this is where I'm hoping what I'm understanding theurgy correctly. Theurgy equal God working.
So theurgy actually, in its beginning stages, has to be predicated on astrology. Absolutely has to be. Um, at the beginning stages, right? The goal is to transcend causal mechanism. And if we're looking at, in the traditional Neoplatonic sense, the structure and position of the universe relative to itself and the bodies which comprise it, um, as causal, as influential, then we want to find the best sort of arrangement of those things to kind of have this upward trajectory outward. It's kind of like the stairs in Harry Potter that are always moving. I don't know if you're a fan, but like when they're trying to get to their dorm room or get places, they're always going up these fucking stairs, but the stairs just move. It's like an MC Escher painting. It's astrology is basically waiting till those stairs are aligned so that you can just fucking fly up. You know, like that. I mean, that's a pretty silly analogy, but that's kind of it. Now, the piece about natal astrology and your natal chart, absolutely. That is that's your starting point. Now, this is attested to in Iamblichus too, because he shits on in multiple writings, he shits all over the astrologers of his day. He says they use it for divination. They use it like drawing lots. It's bullshit. The high actually gets very cranky about it. It's great. He really gets grumpy about it and basically pejoratively sort of chides them and shit and finger wags at them and says like, it's the higher, it's the theurgy where that astrology is important for it. It doesn't give a shit if how many goats should you buy, and it's really interesting. Dr. Gregory Shaw has a couple of really good essays on that for free on academia. I think it's academia.org. So you can read some of those firsthand. He has great commentary on that. But yes, the natal chart is extremely important. Jamie Paul Lamb is the guy for this stuff. He's developed a system of what he calls daimonic astrology. He actually taught a class at the Institute for Hermetic Studies that I took. It was like a 6-part class, and it's exactly that. Using your natal chart to sort of begin a trajectory of daimonic theurgy, and this was essential for Iamblichus, absolutely. Porphyry, interestingly, though he mentions theurgy and then kind of dismisses it later, he laid out a lot of the mechanism by which daimonic astrology is possible, because he's the one where we really hear talking about how the soul descending back into incarnation with its daimon puts on these accretions or astral garments that are influenced by way of the planetary spheres and their arrangement to each other. So you take on essentially what in the Pymander they refer to as the vices. So he talks about what happens after death. You go to the first sphere and a certain vice is relinquished. You go to the second sphere, a second vice is relinquished. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's incredible that it's the same thing, but it is. And so there, that's a huge part of it. Iamblichus did not give us much to go on, but we can and to a large extent have reconstructed certain very important workings. There's things like the Almutis figure, the Almuten figuris from Arabic astrology and things like that. So check out his work, Jamie Paul Lamb, if you want to get a little bit more into daimonic astrology. It's really cool and it's important.
Awesome. All right. So I want to talk about the Vatican ban on Catholics becoming Freemasons. I don't know if you've seen this or you're aware of this. So
Yeah, of
Vatican
course.
City, November 15th, Vatican has confirmed a ban on Catholics becoming Freemasons, a centuries-old secretive society that the Catholic Church has long viewed with hostility and has an estimated global membership of up to 6 million. active membership in Freemasonry by a member of the faithful is prohibited because of the irreconcilability between Catholic doctrine and Freemasonry. The Vatican's doctrinal office said in a letter published by Vatican media on Wednesday. So I wanted to get your
Well,
thoughts on
well, here are my thoughts. You know what's a secretive society? The
what.
fucking church. And you know what I wish they'd ban? Touching all them little kids.
Don't we all?
Okay. And you know what might be the first step to that? Allowing these priests to fucking marry,
Yeah.
you know? Um, so I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me. Um, again, it's you don't even want to hear what I it's all tied together. I don't believe that any institution, particularly nowadays, but at least for the last 200 or 300 years, I do not believe that any institution rises to any significant level of power or prominence without first passing through a gate that has been installed in our society for centuries. And you basically, once you make that decision to pass through that fucking gate and play and enter into that game, um, you don't get to make decisions anymore. Everything becomes political and everything serves one end. But the key to all that working is that you must maintain the illusion of variety, when in reality it's one hand in a multi-fingered glove.
Hmm.
So I think it's political. I think it's irrational. And I think it's just another thing like, okay, guys, what else we got on the docket? It's a fucking distraction. There's the Catholic Church has so much more that it should be dealing with, you know, than okay, what's next? Freemasons?
Hmm.
Nope. Like we don't give a shit. None of us care. So it's we're out here doing charity and lectures and feeding each other. I'm not wearing a fucking pointy hat in a room with gilded walls telling people what they can and cannot do. I mean, I went to the Vatican. Yeah, there's this whole idea of apostolic poverty. If you took your fucking finger and scratched the wall like this, you'd have enough gold under your nail to feed a family of four for a fucking month. So I don't want to hear it. I don't care. No one should care.
Yeah. It's just, yeah. So, like, I see it. I mean, I feel like it's the way they see it is almost like a competition thing. Like, the irony is, like you said, like an institution such as Freemasonry, of which actually imbibes virtuous qualities and character building and maintains an actual uh propagation of integrity within individuals is being banned. And I think that maybe they see it as something like, whoa, you know, a lot of these people are really valuing this thing, Freemasonry, and
It
finding value in it because of its good qualities and the effect that it's having on people gravitating towards it because of it. I feel
well,
like
I think
maybe
as I said before, Freemasonry is a threat to that fucking glove.
Mhm.
That hand under the glove. That's why the glove, the hand under the glove is always, it's, you're always going to be able to tell where it is. You're never going to be able to point out where exactly, but you'll be able to feel the tide because it's always pointing at something and telling you that it's basically taking everything that it is, all the evil and exclusion and selfishness and manipulation and clandestine properties, and it's always projecting that at whatever it's trying to take down. So I don't look at the thing that people are saying is bad. I look at the mouthpiece and I say, well, the bad is in there somewhere. It's animating that because there's a concerted effort. Why now? When's the last time the church discussed fucking Freemasonry?
Hmm.
The first papal bull was in like the 1700s. Why now? Well, you see, I see a concerted effort. Okay, over here you've got the conspiracy thing. You know, Yeah, for years they've been talking about it. It's really nobody gave a fuck about the Freemasons in the 80s. Yeah, it's like it was like after 9/11 that people started going on the fucking internet and talking about the Freemasons. It's this is a recent thing with this particular iteration. Granted, there's been an anti-Masonic furor here and there since the organization started. That's a consequence of fearing the unknown. But there is a concerted effort to paint us, me, and the people I hang with, as like these clandestine movers and shakers trying to like move the world to this oppressive fucking whites only society. It couldn't be further from the fucking truth. That's what this thing does. That's
Mm-hmm.
what whatever's pointing at us saying, oh, you do this thing. No. You're it's like it's not even projecting, it's framing. It's an elementary tool. Kids do it. you know
Yeah.
you blame your shit on someone else. And then not only that, but then you've got the whole anti-masculine solidarity. If you want to be a man in a group with other men, you are all of a sudden fucking far right. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're all of a sudden you're anti fucking justice. You're anti, this social justice movement, whatever the fuck this, the confused mass of wailing really at this point is. It's you're just against that if you say, yeah, men need a place to come together in solidarity too. I mean, the past, like, I think 3 years alone, male suicide rates, which were already extremely high, have doubled. So, and that's probably also a little bit about of what they want. But so there's also this whole, like, intersectional feminist piece where it's like, well, why is it just men? And then there's the whole trans issue that we're going to have to deal with that will likely destroy masonry. It's multiple points coming in to take something down, because, as you say, to your point, an organization that takes young men and brings them in and in bonds of solidarity with their elders and with their contemporaries and with their peers, and then instead of making us fucking brutes and making us weak, sneaky, manipulative men, it it asks us to hold ourselves accountable and be a boon to our society, engage in charity. Every human being has a claim to your kind offices, but first you have to rectify yourself. In order to be able to help others, you have to have some kind of moral compass. Of course, that's not allowed anymore. Of course, we're the fucking bad guys. So it's ultimately that's what I think is going on. And I don't want to veer into like conspiracy theory podcasts, although those are fun to listen to, but it's we it's a fucking reality of our time. It's a reality of our time, and these things transcend. They truly do transcend the purely physical. It's as St. Paul said, we fight not with evil of flesh and blood. We fight against evil in high places, spiritual evil.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very stupid move on their part, but I'm not surprised. Lending more credence to the corrupt aspects of these institutions, for sure. Acting as basically ideological dictators, evil masquerading as holiness, when it's basically in complete opposition. But yeah, okay. So to summarize, I want to get you to summarize. With what we've said, what constitutes a modern philosopher magician? How would you sort of sum that up and what it all means to you, given kind of what we've gone over about, getting kind of a general understanding of these philosophers, the way they think, the way they live, the way they behave, their character, and then kind of tying that in with a magician. What would you say constitutes a modern philosopher magician?
Well, I just would never call myself a modern philosopher magician. I feel like that's a very it the title in and of itself to me wouldn't feel right. It would feel like, wearing like a, I don't know, like a Flavor Flav clock necklace or something like that. You know, like, look at me. You know, I just wouldn't do it. But if you're asking me what I think the attributes of a philosopher and a magician should be,
Yeah.
I think that first of all, you have faith in a higher power, and I don't want to mince words here. I'm not talking about you believe that you know Lucifer or Satan is the guy, is the you live in the light, or you try as hard as you can, and you constantly reach out for some form of connection and assistance. You understand that it's kind of like it's the whole admonition of Tifereth in the mystical Kabbalah. If you know the tree of life, somebody standing in Malkuth looks up at Tifereth and sees a king. But from Kether looking down, you see a baby reaching up. And that to me is the philosopher. And the magician is the theurgist, not goetic magic. Not money magic, not growing in personal power. Because that power is nothing. It's fucking peanuts. It's peanuts. It don't mean shit. The only way to have true power is to completely relinquish the desire for it. And I'm not talking about in some Buddhist way where it's like, now you don't care about anything. So, you have the ultimate freedom. No, that's not what I mean. You'll get power. But you have to really, truly not want it. Like that's just what it is. And then it doesn't become your fucking top priority anymore. Your top priority is the acting out, the expression of your eros for your creator. You're a theurgist. It's not about, monetarily helping people or yourself. It's about embodying the highest possible ideals that you can comprehend, abstractly ground them, bring them down, act them out. That doesn't mean you can be perfect. Good Christians get this rap all the time. Good ones, not the ones who are Bible thumping and yelling at you, but just simply because they are fucking human, they always will be, and they don't do everything perfect. They're viewed as hypocrites. And I that's another really important thing. I think that you need to understand that even if tomorrow, you found out I'm like the worst person in the world, it doesn't invalidate anything I'm telling you, because it is about the message and it's not about the fucking messenger. It should, nothing that anybody else, nowhere where anyone else falters should be your weak excuse to give in and say, it's not real. It was bullshit. No, take it as a challenge upon yourself to go and say, well, I can do it better. I will do it better. I will manifest these qualities. I will ground them, because that's how they win, right? There's always something. We're always human, and one of the quickest ways I think we see in this world that we're living in to get people to abandon the path of morality, the path of good, really the middle path, really, is to kind of show our weaknesses so that we think it's all hypocrisy. And it's that teenage angst bullshit Santa experience all over again. You lied to me, it's not real. So you go and you run to the opposite and just start rebelling again. Don't let that happen. You have to stay grounded in your convictions and understand that these principles transcend people. We're never going to embody them perfectly here, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. And one of the most important things, particularly for a magician, is that you embody the tree in a balanced aspect. That means sometimes Gebura. That means sometimes, the fire of strength and the sword of strength and severity, and that fire of when the forest is overgrown and therefore the health of the forest as a whole is in jeopardy. You have to be able to burn some of it. It's just what it is, like that's the way things work. Um, but at the same time, mercy always before. You engage in severity when it ends up being an ultimate mercy. And that's really it. I mean, I'm sure I could go on for another fucking hour about all these attributes, but I think those are the most important things that are like I'm feeling like I should say.
Amen. Thank you, brother. I love you. I appreciate you. To the listeners, I appreciate all of you so much, sincerely. This was an awesome one, so I'm excited to put it out there. And any closing thoughts to wrap it up?
That's it, man. I love you too. I appreciate, it's been a while since we've done this, so this was fucking excellent. This was a long one. I'm feeling good, beat but good, and I'm gonna sleep well. I appreciate you, dude,
Hell
because
yeah.
I'm being honest with you. None of this is possible without you. You just know how to set the stage and the questions to ask, and kind of, you make because I gotta feel safe, like I can say this stuff, and so that's super important.
Hell yes. All right, brother. Till next time.
All right.